as the years went by, and Facebook, with Facebook, I was Facebook friends with Chris, and he said to me, he saw that I was a Facebook friend of mine with a very old friend of his, whose name is Michael Beattie, and Michael Beattie became the spokesperson for the RSPCA in Brisbane. You probably public relations person. You probably saw him on television quite a bit. However, that's not where it all started, and Michael Beattie was always keeping tabs on Chris through Facebook, always messaging me and saying, how's Chris doing? What's happened? He found out that he was ill, and he always felt very, very close to Chris from their past relationship. Anyway, so I'd like to read this message from Michael Beattie, and this is what he says. Hi Irene, as I said, I don't remember that much as it's been so long since we caught up, but I obviously do remember his love of the bass guitar. We'd be listening to Cream and he'd be marvelling at Eric Clapton while he was tuned in to Jack Bruce. It's an odd coincidence that you took me to see Malcolm Bruce in Brisbane, and I'll sort of go back to that in a minute. Like me, he'd also worked for the BBC in England, and from memory, he told me he'd met John Walters, who produced the program I worked on called Scene, and heard on Radio 1. Wally also produced the legendary John Peel. So, in 2017, the Cream had a 50th anniversary tour, which started off in Australia, and it was all family members of Cream that attended. So we had, I'm just having a blank now, Ginger, yeah, and Kofi Baker's, so Ginger Baker's son, Kofi Baker, and then Malcolm Bruce, who was Jack Bruce's son, and Chris, Michael Beattie told me on the phone that Chris was a big fan of Jack Bruce, who played bass. So, and then there was Will Johns, who's Eric Clapton's nephew, and he was a very good friend of me, which is how I ended up with free tickets and backstage pass later down in Brisbane for that. So anyway, so I invited Michael Beattie along to that concert, and he's forever grateful for that. So anyway, that's one memory of Chris and one of his dear friends from the past. Getting back to Cairns, and when I'd met Chris, I had, for whatever reason, to go and visit with him at the Cairns Post. Now, like me, and a lot of people wouldn't know, because he didn't go on about it like I do, he was a vegetarian. And he took me up to the Chinese restaurant, just a couple of doors down, and said, because he had a weekly column, and he took me up there and says, I want to do a story on this. And it was about the lobsters being all tied up in the fish tank, and how that hurt him. And I don't know if he ever did the story, I don't think he did. But anyway, that was one thing about Chris, and he was a vegetarian, which probably nobody else knew, I don't know. But I remember when he was in Cairns Base Hospital, he sort of took up residence there at one stage, and he was always crying out for whatever he wanted, and he wanted bananas, so I took him some bananas, and then, anyway, the rest is history. But that's my little story about Chris, and, we all loved him, and the family from here, that started with the Blues family and at 12 Bar Blue.